Ex-cons of Reddit. What's the worst thing that happened to you whilst doing your time? Serious. 12 months on the inside. Very first day in prison. Very first day, I was in line for supper and this big guy comes up behind me, squeezes my ass and whispers in my ear, "Are your panties wet?" Scared shitless I turned around, and the guy jumped back and said in a friendly tone, "Oh my mistake mate, thought you were someone else," and left the line. I suppose seeing people getting taken advantage of all of the time and then not caring was the worst. New guys coming in and getting ripped off on trades and stuff. People with social/developmental issues just getting their food taken from them. Also, the psychology of people without goals gets weird. What was worst was just becoming part of that world. There are so many people there that have their rights taken away from them on a regular basis and don't care anymore. They choose to place value on being able to make others fear them. They stop thinking about the world beyond the walls and just get all wrapped up in the weird culture of the place. There was a day I was feeling proud of myself because I was running around organizing contraband trades, setting up poker games, and owning things like hardcover books and the only dice in the place. In that moment of pride I realized I had started to lose my mind. It's honestly hard to remember the months in there because most of the time nothing's fucking happening. Nothing. You've read until you can't stand it. You've slept all you can. You can't play cards cause your cellie is sleeping. So you stare at the ceiling and wait. It's so weird to realize you're doing the equivalent of time out for months. You're not waiting for 5 minutes. Not waiting 5 hours. You're waiting for a day that is months away. Just waiting. TL. Doctor, it's like being in a DMV with a bunch of assholes and your number isn't up until next January. My family came to visit me on Christmas Day the first year I was in. I was so ashamed that I had a little breakdown the next day and punched the cinder block wall inside my cell. One of the guards invited me to come talk to him. I made the mistake of thinking he was a friend and was talking about the meaning of life and why things happened. He decided he thought I was suicidal, which I wasn't. The next day I was shipped off to a maximum security prison in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, stripped down naked and given a Kevlar smock to wear. They keep the temperature down at 60 degrees, which means that you have to stay huddled in a corner to conserve body heat. Because this was observation I wasn't allowed to have anything. Nothing to read, watch, etc. Naked and cold for an entire week. If you'd like to see what this is like, turn your thermostat down. Then take all your clothes off and sleep on the floor of your bathroom with the light on for 6 days straight. No showering either. Wasn't offered a chance to clean myself. That's how I spent New Year's 2007. Observation is not some kind of psychological treatment. It's punishment and mental torture. Sleeping and singing to yourself is all you can do. Too cold to do anything else. Fucking brutal. Now I try to go out of the country for New Year's Eve every year. 8 months inside, and one instance always sticks out in my mind. I was running out of phone minutes and spending what precious time I had left talking to my child. We didn't get to talk as much as I liked, had unfortunately more important people to talk to, lawyers, trying to find jobs for my release, etc. This asshole comes up, "I need the phone." Hold on man, I only got a couple minutes left. He takes the phone and slammed it into the shitty payphone holster and abruptly hung up on my daughter. Still breaks my heart because I cherish every minute I can have with her. The first day I was assigned to a new unit after being sentenced, DUI, 90 days, I got put in a 5-man cell. It wasn't my first time locked up and had been in the jail a few weeks, so I wasn't too nervous. The guys were cool to me all evening. All 4 had done time before in much worse prisons. They were all playing cards and I didn't know the game, so I sat on my bunk reading. They started off saying weird cryptic gay stuff, random stuff regarding Vaseline, and who was cute on the block, etc. It ramps up over the course of an hour, then they start playing strip poker. Meanwhile I've been hearing every word they say, and studiously ignoring it. They got bored of being subtle, and began saying awful stuff about fucking each other in the ass. I ignore everything, while secretly getting scared shitless they're going to do something to me. Eventually all 4 got up, shirtless, and they trapped me on my top bunk and started grabbing at me. I yelled what the fuck, and they collapsed in laughter and spent the next 48 hours telling everyone who'd listen. TL. Doctor, new guy in 5-man cell. They pretend they're gonna gang rape me. 3 things. 2 weeks in, I'm in a fight for my life with a 250-pound serial rapist that wanted my butt. 2 years in, and I get informed my 5-year-old was run over and killed when her mother was dropping her off at the babysitter's. She let my 5-year-old cross the street alone. And then 2 days before my release, my grandma passed. The only family I had and connection to the outside world. She let me call her once a month collect. I did 3.5 years in Texas prisons. I believe that the worst story I can recall was my first full day in a state jail facility used as a transition center for up to 2 years before one is sent to a real prison in Texas. A guy came up to me asking if I smoke cigarettes. I didn't, but thought, why not? So he told me to head to the gym when that time came later that afternoon. We went to the gym and fired up a cigarette while we walked around the basketball court. As we were walking around the court, we approached the universal gym machine, where a variety of people were using the various pieces to work out. The guy who offered me the cigarette advised me to follow him to the other side of the basketball court and to stay away from the universal gym. A few minutes later, a guy sat down and leaned back to do some bench press when 4 guys grabbed him, 1 on each arm and 1 on each leg. 2 other guys pull out cans of chili or fried beans, as both were available, in socks, and proceed to hammer the guy in the face. The guy at the bench press had his face completely caved in. All I could think was, what have I gotten myself into? I also recall one other time when I was at the pre-release facility at the beta unit where a guy had his face cut up with a box cutter and his throat slit over $20. The guy who died even had about $40 worth of cigarettes on him when he died. I never had anything happen to me directly per se. There were a few fights I got into over various things, usually just respect. Now I'm just rambling. Did 3 weeks in county for basically being at the wrong place at the wrong time. I had just turned 18 and had never been in trouble, not even in school. I was interrogated in a small room by a huge undercover agent with a stash who told me that they knew I was the ringleader and that he would make it his personal mission to see that I spent the rest of my life in jail. Did not know any details, so I said nothing. When I was put in a cell, my cellmate was a 6'2" bald Mexican gangster guy, and every night he would loudly masturbate while I clinched my thin bed sheets in fear, not sleeping until I knew for sure I no longer hurt him. I was released for lack of evidence. Good times. Did 7 in Pennsylvania State Prison. Saw a guy who was accidentally cleared by psych to be in general population go out to yard and try to cut his own head off with the razor wire. It was morning yard, not a lot of people out, and he sprinted toward the fence. As soon as he got out there, we all thought, oh shit, we've never seen someone try to get over these forests of razor wire. But then this fucker turns around with his back right up against the fence, cops coming from 3 directions yelling into their radios, and he loops a circle of razor wire around his neck and starts sawing. A fucking waterfall of blood. Cops froze. Everyone froze. That shit was really unexpected. They told us he lived, but fuck me if I know how. I was incarcerated for 9 years, 1 month, 4 days. I've seen many things. I just turned 30. I will start a rammer when I have time. The worst I've seen was 2 guys on life sentences back in courts for retrial seeing a rival enemy in for DUI over the weekend. Guy didn't make it home. 2 lifers stabbed him. I'm assuming 100 times, tied him up in blankets, sent to trash delivery. 2 guys were caught there later when missing body was found before trash was disposed. I can answer as an ex-corrections officer. I was 4.5 years in Cofield unit in Texas. I think the worst thing I ever saw was a guy who was masturbating with a light bulb. One of those little screw-in 60-watt light bulbs. Anyway, the guy stuck it up his ass, glass end first, and couldn't get it out. He asked the guards to take him to medical, and I was on the escort team. He was in segregation. We get to medical and sit for a while. Next thing I know, the guy is screaming, blood and shit run everywhere, and he just passes out. We ended up having to life flight him out to the closest hospital where they opened him up and rinsed his ass out. I was in the room the whole time. I'm still traumatized. I'm going to give you a family story. My cousin got into some cocaine and heroin problem shortly after his mother died. He did a robbery at knife point on a local shop where my brother now works. Anyway, he goes away for 10 years, serves 8 and was released 3 years ago. He has a wife and 2 kids, and is doing really well, so happy ending. The story that comes to mind. During his 5th year he is one of the longest serving members of the prison, short stay prison in England with only a few people serving sentences over 2 years. Anyway, he gets a guy living next to his cell and starts chatting with him in the cafeteria. They become friends, and after about 3 months people think nothing of it. But 3 months after he arrives, the inmates break into the back office of the prison and find everyone's records. They find out my cousin's mate has been transferred to this prison because his last prison found out he was a kiddie fiddler and he was moved for his safety. My cousin gets told flat out while at dinner one day, so and so has been done for kiddie fiddling. Do something or you both get it from us. Fearing his safety, my cousin goes over and whacks the guy straight in the jaw with a tray, breaks his jaw and a couple of teeth. My cousin proves he was not sympathizing with a pedo and didn't get his head kicked in. Sent into solitary confinement for 2 weeks. Came late and I've shared in a similar thread about the guys getting beat to death in front of me, so I'll share my worst that I was involved in. I was arrested in a different state after skipping out of my home state. While waiting for extradition back, they don't fuck around. County maximum security. I'm in with the worst of the worst. All murder, rape, kidnapping charges. So my only experience with jail prior to this was watching the Shawshank Redemption Oz prison shows on TV. So I'm scared shitless. I'm a big guy. At the time 6'6", about 280 lbs. Pretty solid fighter, but I know I'm in with hardened criminals that will kill me for a cupcake, or so I thought. Anyway, first day in, I stay in my cell. Sleep all day, think about my life. Halfway through the day a group of the biggest guys come in and ask for my papers to make sure I wasn't a pedo. Later I talk to my cellmate a bit and he seems nice. Says he needs a spades partner and I know how to play. He says the next day we will play and he will show me around. Next morning we sleep in and around 11 go down and get a game. I'm like a scared rabbit looking around, checking my back, just waiting to get shanked. We get to playing and I'm getting to know the guys. Everyone seems cool. I'm good at spades and so is my cellie, so we are kicking ass. After a few games the other team is getting agitated and I'm gloating a bit. So the guy to my right eventually gets upset and starts yelling, calling me a cheat and this and that. I brush it off, but am on full alert just waiting for a fight. So when he yells fuck this and fuck you, he stands up and I pop up and blast him in the face as hard as I can. He crumples to the ground and starts spitting out teeth. Everyone in the common area just stares at me like WTF. It was later explained that people get upset at card games, but never fight in view of gourds. My cellmate put jam in my shoes the morning of my release. Oh, and when I first got there they accidentally entered me into the system twice, giving me 2 prisoner-aids, only one of which worked, and put all my money and post on the other one. Didn't sort this out till I finished my sentence months later. I spent a short amount of time in a county jail. The first morning they came and handed out those small cardboard cereal boxes that come in variety packs. I remember wolfing down the cereal as I hadn't eaten in a day or 2 and was starving. They then came back around and served the milk. I was pissed. Processing into La County Jail just after the first showers. Everybody is lined up to proceed to the next stage of processing. We were told to leave our towels in a pile on the floor and step forward when your name is called. One Hispanic fellow was called but did not speak any English. He was still carrying his towel. The deputy commanded him to stop and leave his towel in the pile. He did not respond. One deputy used his taser on the dude while 2 others dropped knees on him. The guy was rolling on the floor screaming apologies in broken English and Spanish. The guy received 1 warning. A few of us tried asking other Hispanics to inform him of the rule before he got to the deputies, but no further effort was made. I realize this isn't the worst tale on this post, just goes to show that violence happens for totally silly reasons in jail/prison. 57 months of federal time here. I was in Atlanta. Uspaco told a guy who had smeared his own shit all over himself that if he wanted to impress him to eat it, he did. Seen many rapes. Worst rape was a guy, white, gang raped then extorted for money by blacks. Seen about 12 people get shanked. They say 10 a day on average and ATL. The worst was in the rec yard in Devonsmar. A fine citizen was sitting at a picnic table when a gentleman came up behind him and slashed his face with a razor. There was no blood for what seemed like forever, then his face looked like it fell in half and blood gushed everywhere. Got into a fight with a co in Brooklyn who was being a douche. Seen a guard get nearly killed by Mexicans in Cap. The co took a guy's tattoo equipment away, and the guy had a heroin habit, and tattooing was how he made his money for drugs. The guy begged the co for the stuff back. Co refused. The guy went back to his room for his shank and the co ended up having a bad day. Well, I'm late and none of my friends Reddit, so fuck a throwaway. I spent 10 months in a ranch and 13 months in juvenile hall. I know it isn't the same as prison, but I was just an innocent kid, so it was extremely hard. The worst thing that happened to me actually occurred when I escaped from the ranch I was at. At that point I had spent about 2 months in juvenile and was at the ranch for about 24 hours. I was in one of the only opportunities I'd have to be unsupervised, so I ran. I ran for 14 hours and through 4 cities before coming to a road. After walking so long and being so tired, I was desperate and started to stick out my thumb to hitchhike at about 4 AM as I walked. After a while a car actually stopped and let me hop in. A baba-faced nervous looking man was driving the car. I tried to make small talk to divert attention from the fact I was wearing bright orange pants. I thought he might know I escaped, but in mid-conversation he just blatantly grabbed my penis. Looking back, I wish every day that I beat his face in inside that red car, but instead I just ask him to pull over. Surprisingly, he does. I wasn't raped or anything, but that shit will haunt me for the rest of my life. Phew, I feel a lot better.